guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to my series of Star Wars reviews leading up to the Mandalorian and Grogu coming out. And today I am reviewing Star Wars The Force Awakens, starring Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Harrison Ford, Oscar Isaac, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. As a new threat to the galaxy rises, Rey, a desert scavenger, and Finn, an ex-stormtrooper, must join Han Solo and Chewbacca to search for the one hope for restoring peace. Now, I have lots of nostalgic memories with The Force Awakens. This was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw in theaters. I saw it with my mum, my dad, my brother, my auntie, my uncle, my cousins, my three cousins. As soon as that Star Wars theme played by John Williams and it said Star Wars, the audience went berserk. Like, this was even before Endgame. You would have thought that that was during the time where, like, not a lot of clap and cheering was happening in theaters. So, like, this was the first time that I actually experienced that, and I was like, oh my god, people actually care about this. And I've only seen this movie, I think, twice. Once in theaters and when my brother got it on DVD, so this was actually my third time seeing it for this review. Now, I didn't realise that there was hate for The Force Awakens when the movie came out. And I didn't mind that it was kind of a new, modern version of A New Hope. Because they were restarting Star Wars, and we haven't gotten a theatrical live-action Star Wars movie since a decade before with Revenge of the Sith. But I will say that it does do a good job where it does do a remake of New Hope, but you're not necessarily thinking about A New Hope while you're watching it. Because it's different enough from A New Hope that you're not making that connection right away. Another memory I have with this movie is that when I was in music class at school, we had a task which we had to re-sound the Force Awakens trailer. So, like, add new music, add sound effects to the scenes that were already in the trailer that suited the scenes, so we had to find a sound for the TIE Fighter. We had to find a sound for BB-8. And that was one of the first times that like a teacher kind of realized what kind of industry I want to be in. Because my music teacher, I sat down with my parents for parent-teacher interviews and was like, Jack's actually really passionate about this, because he's shown me his thing the other day and I was actually very impressed. And so that was one of those few times that someone actually realized what I want to do when I grow up, and I didn't have to go like, oh, I want to do this, if that makes sense. I love the references to the characters from the original trilogy, like the whole plot that everyone is after a map. And like BB-8 has a piece of the map that R2-D2 needs to find Luke Skywalker. I love seeing the old Star Destroyer crash in the desert, and Kylo Ren talking to Darth Vader's old helmet is so cool. Obviously, the action sequences are more entertaining in this movie because it was made in 2015. And the camera moves around more during the fights, especially like the whole Millennium Falcon chase scene is so good with the camera moving and the following the Millennium Falcon around, and like it does all these crazy moves that you don't see in the original trilogy that you're like, oh my god, this is cool. You do feel like that the way that they have set up the sequels with this movie is like they were trying to make Finn the main character of the trilogy, because he's a stormtrooper that turns from being a stormtrooper to being a good guy. That alone is a very cool concept for a movie, because that is like the Force Unleashed games and stuff. Now let's talk about that where Han and Chewie come back into the movie on the Millennium Falcon. I remember that scene being a big part of the trailer when that came out, and I can't remember who I was watching with, maybe it was my brother, I can't remember. But when I saw that, whoever I was with was like, oh my god. I was like, okay, that's cool. It was one of those things where it's like, I was young, I was in high school, I knew more than your average Joe. I mean, I say that, but I knew more than some other people with movies and stuff, but like, but also at the time I was kind of wrapping my head around the idea of like reboots and remakes and that type of stuff. But that was the first time that I kind of remember that, and like, imagine what everyone reacted to when they saw that in the trial, but reacting into a theatre and actually seeing that whole sequence play out where someone is breaking onto the ship and then Han and Chewie come on and they're looking around the ship and Han's like, Chewie, we're home. That theatre went berserk. I was like, oh my god. I do love the characters in this movie and the sequel trilogy in general. I love Rey. I'm a huge Rey fan in the whole trilogy. I really think that Daisy really does a fantastic job in this movie. Basically being a scavenger person that is looking for parts so she can actually get basically money. And I think that John Boyega does a really good job as Finn. Stormtrooper that turns sides. I feel like they could have been its own separate movie entirely, but for what they have to do, it's done very, very well. It's kind of shocking that this movie is the most important that Finn's ever been. Like, because like, we'll talk about it in the other two movies, but like, the other two movies, he has a little bit more to do in Rise of Skywalker. He doesn't have a lot to do in Last Jedi, but we'll talk about that. It's crazy that Harrison Ford came back to this, because you can tell that he's a different personality almost from the original trilogy. But Harrison Ford is like so fun in this movie, and it's so good. I love seeing Han back. And how come Han got the line, I got a bad feeling about this, even though that it didn't come from the originals, it came from the prequels. That was kind of funny to me. The fact that Rey knew how to drive the Millennium Falcon better than Han Solo. The guy who won the Castle Run 12 parsecs, which they make a funny comment that Rey was like, this is the shit that made the Castle Run in almost 14 parsecs. And bloody Han Solo's like, 12, 14. That was very funny to me. I actually really, really like that joke. I feel like they should have done Rey being related to Han and Leia, unlike what we get in the next two movies, which we'll talk about. Because there is no reason for her to know how to fly the Millennium Falcon if she is related to who she ends up being related to. And this movie sets up Snoke as the Emperor figure of the sequel trilogy. But unfortunately, we'll talk about it, but like, they do a ballsy move in the next one that I'm like, wow, that is bonkers to me. We do get a whole scene of Han explaining of where he thinks Luke went, and the fact that he was going to train the future of Jedis. That is kind of what we do see him doing in Last Jedi, which we will talk about. But we will get in the next movie, which we'll talk about. But they do kind of flip that on its head a little bit. This was one of those things where, like, the first time I saw this movie didn't really bug me, but now it really did bug me. Since when did bloody Chewie have a girlfriend? And out of all the aliens, why does it have to be Maz Kanata? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, bloody goes like, oh, what? She says something like, oh, where's Chewie? And Han's like, Chewie's work on the ship. And Maz is like, I do like that Wookiee. Like, Jesus! She wants to get some bloody hairs up in her. Like, Jesus Christ. Oh my god. That joke got so inappropriate so quickly in a franchise that hardly gets that inappropriate. That is bonkers to me. I like the action scene where Finn has the lightsaber for the first time and he's trying to figure it out how to use it, and Han tries Chewie's gun and he like shoots it. He's like, I like this. And then eventually the Resistance joins in. That's a cool action scene. You could tell that there was setting up a relationship between Finn and Rey, much like they did with Han and Leia in the original trilogy. And you can kind of tell by this movie they were setting up the sequel trilogy version of Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, C-3PO, R2-D2 group in this movie alone. And when you get down the trilogy, especially in Rise of Skywalker, they tried to kind of do that group with those characters. Even though they like it, we don't get a whole lot of time with them together within the trilogy as a whole. Because this movie, Poe is with Finn at the beginning of the movie. For most of the rest of the movie, Finn is with Rey, and then Rey doesn't meet Poe until the end of Last Jedi, and then they're kind of with each other throughout Rise of Skywalker, but there are times when they kind of go on their own separate missions, but for the most part they all are together. Which, like, we'll talk about, I think I've put it down for Rise of Skywalker, I think. Even though that you could say that Luke was with Yoda for half of Empire Strikes Back, we still got a bunch of scenes of Han, Luke, Leia together. And that was really, really cool. But we don't get much of that in this trilogy. The scene when Leia and Han meet up again, you get so many emotions when you see them together. You're like, yes, finally they're back together. And you kind of feel like you're about to cry because you have so many emotions that you're like, oh my god, like, I know, you feel so like, oh my god, I'm about to get emotional. When Leia says there's still light in him, I know it. It's one of those things where they are trying to do the Force sensitive thing, like they did in Empire Strikes Back, but something about the way they did in Empire Strikes Back was a lot more of a fluent thing, which this was like almost like how someone will just kind of go like, oh, I just know it. And like, it's kind of like where like, they might have a feeling, but like, you're not 100% sure if they have that feeling, which like, the way that Leia has it in the original, you know that Leia has that feeling because you've seen Luke right before it, and she's like, we need to go back for Luke. And it's like, he's still alive, I feel it. Because we know that he's still alive, because the way they showed that, they literally showed Luke beforehand falling down onto the pole in Empire Strikes Back, and Leia doing that line right after that. So, like, I think it was just a bit of a, which I think this one was more of a, we need to show that Leia still has the Force sensitive ability. I like how they point out that Starkiller Base is just a bigger version of the Death Star, and I like when movies make fun of that, where it's like, this was the Death Star, now this is Starkiller Base, and Han Solo just goes like, so it's bigger. That's very funny to me. I actually really like that. That's good. You feel like that the stakes are high when Finn, Han, Chewie, and Rey are on Starkiller Base. It's higher more than it was in Episode 4, especially since the bad guy is now Han and Leia's son, and part of Han's job is to bring him back home to Leia and Han. And the scene with Han and Ben on the bridge is emotional and powerful as hell. That's what's important about the sequel trilogy, is that the old game's relationship to Kylo Ren. How Han and Leia are the parents, Luke is the uncle, which we'll know more, which we'll talk about that in our next video. All these, like, especially our original trio, right? Like our trio of Han, Luke, and Leia. How those three are very integral to the character of Ben Solo, and how they're family. And that's what makes the character arc of not just Ben, but also Leia and Luke, even Han Solo, that's what makes those character arcs so good. And we'll talk about that in the next two movies. And when Ben eventually kills Han is a moment that you're like, oh Jesus Christ, because you know it's coming because you've seen the movie before, but you're like, oh Jesus Christ, you still get scared of that. And I remember the theatre reaction to that was bonkers. Like, people were like, oh! Like, that was crazy. That was such a turn. I was like, oh my god, this is so good. And there is so many cool imagery when Ben, Finn and Rey are fighting in the forest with the snow and the lightning of the lightsabers. That is so cool to me. This movie actually sets up The Last Jedi very well. With the ending that we have, Luke had to be doing something that is trying to get him out of a very bad place. But we'll talk about that in our next review. I'm going to give The Force Awakens 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think this movie is great, but it did get a little worse for me since the theatre. Because I kind of knew where the trilogy goes. But I'm curious to see what my thoughts are on The Last Jedi. Because I've only seen that movie once. So we'll see. I'm curious to see. I will not be surprised if I'll have lots of thoughts. Same as I have so many thoughts on Rise of Skywalker, which we'll get into that. So guys, please hit the like button down below if you haven't already. Hit subscribe. Also press the little bell icon to get notified of future videos that I'll make. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.
Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.